policy. A council in London, the London Borough of Hackney, has already banned cars from some streets around schools. The Labour Mayor of Hackney, Philip Glanville, joins us now, as well as the journalist and father, Harry Wallop. Welcome to you both. How's it working, actually, Philip?
We've done 4 school streets with parents and schools leading the charge. They come to us, they talk to us about the type of scheme that they would like, and during pick-up and drop-off, we restrict vehicles passing through and parents dropping off on those streets.
So how far you can... And a lot of parents are presumably still dropping their children off, but they're dropping them off a few streets away, right? Or...
Well, only 10% of parents drop off their children to school in Hackney anyway. So it's about restricting those that are still dropping off and the through traffic as well. So it's making those streets better for their communities, better for children and better for those that are already walking and cycling to school.
If you come into that street, and you can, it's not physically blocked off, you've just got cameras, right?
We've got
filming.
Cameras,
If you come into the street, what's the fine?
£65.
How many people are paying? How many fines are you getting?
At the start of the schemes, we were seeing 8 a day, and it's now fallen to 3. The aim is not to have anyone being fined. It's to change the behaviour around those schools. It's not about raising more resources. It's about changing attitudes to driving around our schools. We've introduced things like 20-mile-an-hour zones, making people more aware about that.
I'd like to talk about that because I think that's part of. OK, Harry Wallop, you're a father. How does that sound?
Well, you know, as Philip says, only 10% of people in Hackney drive and drop their kids off at school. I live at neighbouring borough and I walk my kids to school in rain or shine, but I'm the lucky one. I only live a kilometre from school. This may work in inner city London, where actually nitrogen oxide particles only represent 5% from private vehicles. They're only responsible for 5% of all that nitrogen oxide. You know, the problem is going to be in other cities where people have to drive a bit further.
Right, well, I'm thinking of maybe more rural areas where the distances are much greater.
And the infrastructure is not in place. You know, buses, you know, even in Manchester, school kids have to pay £1.30 every time they get on a bus. And if you've got 2 or 3 children, then, of course, driving is going to end up being a lot cheaper. It's very expensive outside of London to use the infrastructure to not drive your children to school.
Well, let's see how it's working in Hackney. So have you got figures, Philip, on how many parents have now stopped driving their children to school or anywhere near the school? I mean, I suppose...
It's very early days for those 4 pilots, but the feedback has been absolutely fantastic from parents. They've reclaimed the streets after school for play streets.
Is that parents who have cars and drop the kids off, or is that parents who never did drop
Well, I think the whole point is the school community coming together and taking this step. It's not about... I think the report has been somewhat misrepresented. There's 21 recommendations in the Living Streets report, and it picks up on some of those challenges that we've heard about elsewhere in the country and starts to say schools should have travel plans, they should be looking at what physical infrastructure changes, what other travel policies need to be put in place to make schools more accessible without the private car. And it may well be in some areas it's carpooling, it may be, you know, better school bus services.
Is the air cleaner? Have you measured the air, actually?
We're measuring it, and we'll be... after the pilot, there'll be a 6-month report.
Harry Wallop, this is definitely one of those decisions that is much easier for everybody to make than for one family to make, isn't it? And it's a collective decision that if there are more children walking to school, it is easier for the other children to walk to school because it's safer, the streets are fuller, the other cars are watching out for children.
But if you ask parents why they drive to school, I'm intrinsically against the idea of banning anything like this, but if you ask them why they're driving to school, there's usually very good practical reasons. And either it's because it's on their way to work and it just makes sense. You're not actually cancelling a trip, it's just a stop off on a trip. Or because they don't feel it's safe. And we know, of course, traffic accidents involving children have fallen massively over the last generation, and that might be because more people are driving to school and there are fewer... I know that's a sort of a catch-22 situation, and they just don't feel the streets are safe. And we know that a lot of London streets aren't that safe.
That takes us to the fact that Hackney, and is not alone in this, is a borough where every street is 20-mile-per-hour speed limit. Now, how is that working? Because that if you can enforce that, then parents may be more willing to let their children walk because they won't be worrying about safety, as Harry said.
But I think it goes beyond the 20 mile an hour. It's filtering roads, creating neighbourhoods that are more livable, that are closed to through traffic. So one of the enemies to all of this is a lot of rat running, use of Waze, use of Google Maps. If you close those streets and filter those streets...
But then you're filtering them into these streets where...
But you're putting them on main roads.
You're putting them on streets where other people live.
But main roads are built for cars.
But there's a lot of primary school on main... This is the problem.
You also see evaporation as well, so fewer car journeys overall because you change attitudes to streets. The more pleasurable you make them, the more you encourage walking and cycling, the more that people use them and feel safe on them. And that's the evidence that happens when we do our filtering.
I just feel this is once again the poor old motorist being, you know, the victim of eco-virtue signalling. You know, it's not going to make a massive difference. It shoves the traffic onto other roads. And I know those roads in Hackney quite well. And the areas where there have been the road closures are lovely. They're lovely to cycle and walk around. But the main roads are now gridlock.
See, that slightly worries me. Is that the street I live on is very, very nice, but there are other streets where the cars are forced to go, which are then left less
It's
nice.
about more filtering rather than less. The more neighbourhoods that you create that are traffic-free, the easier it is to have school streets, play streets, and the more they're reclaimed for families and children, and they breathe cleaner air.
We will leave it there. Thank you both very much